You arrive in Cuba all dressed up, thinking you'll find that so-called resistance, cigar in your mouth, salsa in your ears, and suddenly some beautiful girls and others, wow, really unattractive ones, start approaching you. And what do these women want? To exchange an entire night of love, not for dollars, but for a pack of pasta, a cell phone recharge, or even a tube of toothpaste. I know, it sounds like a bad joke, but it's very real. Quite surreal, isn't it? While on the outside they sell Cuba as a tropical paradise frozen in time, on the inside, survival became currency. And the scariest part is that this is just the beginning of the story, because Havana's hidden secret goes far beyond what you can imagine. Cuba's hidden secret. Nobody tells you this about Cuba, but everybody knows. While the tourist exits the plane dreaming of salsa, cigars, and Varadero sunsets, the reality of the situation is quite different. Havana hides an uncomfortable secret, a parallel business that everyone pretends not to see, but that is on every corner. The name? Gineteras. In official translation, it even sounds pretty, like jockeys, if you catch my drift. However, in reality, it's the term used for Cubans, primarily women, but also men, who exchange intimate companionship for money or even more essential items. And that is when the penny drops. It's not just about pleasure, it's profoundly about survival. In Cuba, one night can be worth an entire month's state salary, which typically averages around $20 to $30. Now imagine, a girl from the countryside arrives in Havana, agrees to go out with the tourist, and in a few hours, she's made what her mother slaves all month to earn in the fields. But that's not the shocking part. We're not talking about big money, Latin luxury, nothing like that. Some women agree to go out in exchange for a pack of spaghetti, 2 phone recharges, or a tube of toothpaste. It's surreal. In Europe, tourists take home souvenirs as mementos. In Cuba, tourists leave bars of soap as a form of payment. And that's not an urban legend or a YouTuber's exaggeration. Cubans themselves will tell you this openly on the streets. If you could get me some food, I would go with you. I'm always hungry. One of them even mentioned that she had a 7-year-old son waiting for her at home. And think about it. How can you see that and still believe in the postcard version of Cuba? Because behind the music and the rum, there's this parallel economy, a secret the government pretends doesn't exist, that tourists pretend they don't see, but which shapes the lives of thousands of young people. The economy of despair. In Cuba, the official state salary barely goes above $30 a month. 30. That's less than what most people spend on a typical dinner in Miami, Lisbon, or even at a dive bar in Brazil. And that's where the island's cruelest math truly enters the picture. A single night on the streets can bring in what a person earns in an entire month working for the state. Now imagine, if you were a young woman from the countryside with a large chest and a great pair of legs, with a hungry family at home waiting for help, what would you do? That's why so many people leave the countryside and go to Havana, promised a better future. But when they get there, the work they're offered isn't quite what they had in mind. And here's the most absurd part of it all. It isn't always about money. Some girls go out with tourists in exchange for food, cell phone recharges, used clothes, or even just soap or toothpaste. In Cuba, that's worth as much as a US dollar. It's the so-called economy of despair, where a pair of jeans is more valuable than the local currency. To give you an idea, there are people who agree to go out with a foreigner for $20, $30. Some, in tourist bars, might even charge $200 or $300, but the majority don't even ask for money. Instead, they ask for what they lack at home. Would you like to be even more astonished? I've heard women say, "Just buy me some food. I'm constantly hungry." And many tourists step into this void, believing they are saviors, when in fact, they're simply taking advantage of a flawed system. Because a peculiar kind of relationship unfolds here. Sometimes the girl forms a bond with the foreigner. The guy comes back the next year, sends money, clothes, promises of marriage. It may seem like love, but seeing the age and power difference, you realize one is there out of desire, the other out of necessity. It's the most unbalanced romance imaginable. The sad truth is this isn't an exception. It's a daily occurrence. Cuba turned survival into a marketplace, and intimacy became currency. But make no mistake, this isn't just about money, you know? Because this game of promises and favors hides many traps, and that's where the dangerous part begins. When pleasure turns into a trap, the story is already heavy. But in Cuba, the line between pleasure and peril is so thin, it vanishes. Many people believe it's just a casual encounter, an informal arrangement, but reality can swiftly transform into a trap. This is how it operates. You're walking in Havana, a friendly woman approaches, chats you up, compliments your shirt. Innocent enough, right? 2 minutes later, she's suggesting a bar. The logic's straightforward. You cover her drinks, and then the proposition follows. Up to this point, it's all rather predictable. However, the problem truly begins when they attempt to lure you away from the crowds. They will all take you to a dark alley, an unlit street, far from anyone. And it's no coincidence. I've heard locals say, if they take you to that place, you're doomed, because often it's not just her. There's a whole group waiting for you at the street's end. There have been tourists who left with nothing, no phone, no wallet, literally not even the clothes on their back. And that's when you realize that the cheap comes out expensive. What seemed like an adventure can turn into a group mugging. It's the Cuban combo: charm upon arrival, violence when you leave. And it doesn't end there. Aunts offer their own nieces. Girls who quite obviously aren't 18 years old trying to make advances. These situations make anyone uncomfortable, yet they reveal the profound level of need some families experience. I witnessed this firsthand. I invited a young woman to eat so she'd have something in her stomach. That's all. And what did she think? That I was game. She started touching me, coming on to me, thinking the meal was a transaction. And when I said no, she insisted, gesturing, almost begging. That's when the penny dropped. For many people here, there's no free lunch, not even in the literal sense. And this misrepresentation even alters the perception of Cuban women. To the unsuspecting foreigner, it seems like all of them are available. They're not little grasshopper. But it only takes half a dozen tourists bragging at a bar to spread the idea that Cuba has become a cheap amusement park for adults. From the cradle of the revolution to today's reality, to understand why a pair of jeans is worth more than the official currency in Cuba today, we need to go back in time. And the perfect place for that is Santiago de Cuba, on the eastern tip of the island, known as the cradle of the revolution. This is where Fidel Castro studied, spoke, and began the rebellion that changed Latin American history. In 1953, Fidel Castro and a group of young men attempted an attack on the Moncada barracks. It failed. Many were arrested, and some were even executed. Fidel was convicted, but during his trial, he famously declared the phrase that resonates even now: "History will absolve me." Indeed, history might have acquitted him, yet the Cuban people continued to bear the penalty. Fast forward to 1959, Batista escapes the nation. Fidel enters Havana, welcomed with open arms by the crowd. He promised freedom, democracy, equality. And you know what he delivered? A survival guide. Private companies were nationalized, the press was censored, and dissidents were imprisoned or exiled. And the so-called dream of social justice turned into a one-party regime. The irony is that on paper the revolution seemed logical. Cuba had inequality, corruption, and rural poverty. Change was needed, but the cure turned out to be more bitter than the disease. Decades later, the country remains in permanent scarcity, and the government consistently blames the same scapegoat, the U.S. embargo. Meanwhile, the propaganda keeps selling the image of a romantic Cuba: rum, salsa, cigars, and vintage cars. But you just have to turn the camera slightly to the side to see another Cuba, the one the postcard doesn't show. And the craziest part is that this propaganda still works, as Cuba is seen abroad as exotic and revolutionary. But for those on the island, what remains are queues, hunger, and silence. The weight of history truly burdens the present. If you inquire of a Cuban why their country faces such circumstances, the response is almost instantaneous. It's el bloqueo, the U.S. embargo. This has served as the official justification for over 6 decades. Of course, the embargo exists, it impacts, it hinders, but it doesn't explain all. It's like if a Brazilian were to blame China for all of the country's internal problems. Sure, China has an influence. It floods the market with cheap products. It weakens parts of the national industry. But that doesn't explain why BR 101 has had potholes for 10 years, why corruption consumes billions in overpriced projects, or why public hospitals lack gauze. External influence matters, yet internal disorganization and mismanagement bear even greater weight. Cuba's situation reflects this. The embargo serves as a convenient alibi. It exists, but it functions almost like a political wildcard, a ready-made excuse to cover up the lack of internal reforms, the inefficiency of the state production system, the suffocating bureaucracy, and even the repression of those who try to create alternatives. What truly burdens Cuba is its closed political model, where there's only one party, one narrative, and just a single official version of reality. Dissent brings prison, exile, or eternal silence. Freedom has become a luxury item, something for those who manage to escape to Miami. And the brilliant propaganda made Cuba an ideological showcase. For some, it's a symbol of anti-imperialist resistance. For others, it's an example of communist failure. In the middle of this tug-of-war, it's the people who suffer, continuing to stand in line for chicken and share soap between neighbors. There's even a Spanish word that defines this feeling well: morriña. It's that painful longing for a place you can no longer return to. Many exiled Cubans talk about it. They adore their island, yet they acknowledge that as it stands, they cannot truly live there. It's the dilemma of those who carry the scent of the sea in their hearts but have to sell pastries in Miami to survive. And this contradiction is the hallmark of Cuba. On one hand, it preserved a unique cultural identity: music, dance, architecture frozen in time. On the other, it sacrificed freedom, innovation, and even basic dignity. It's a living museum, beautiful for photos, but difficult to inhabit. The irony of fate: the revolution that promised equality ended up delivering inequality disguised as resistance. The narrative speaks of victory against the empire. The common practice involves endless queues and wages that can't even afford a single dinner at a tourist restaurant. But wait, Cuba isn't just pain and misery, right? Because even in this scenario, there are still people who sing, dance, play baseball, and try to smile. And that's where the island shows another side, more human, lighter, but just as full of contradictions. The other side of the island. After all that heaviness, it seems almost impossible to say, but Cuba also has a light side. And it's precisely this mix that makes the island so bewildering. One minute you're listening to a story of hunger, the next someone's playing guitar and dancing salsa as if nothing ever happened. In Santiago, the interior, or Havana, the street is a stage. You'll discover professional dancers performing for meager change, musicians transforming any street corner into a vibrant show, and even baseball players who, if they were in the United States, would be earning millions. But here, they play, drenched in sweat, for an almost empty stadium. And that's truly no exaggeration. Even Fidel Castro once dreamed of becoming a baseball player. He did not succeed. Ultimately, he pushed the nation into an endurance test, where survival with available resources is the rule. And food? Forget gourmet. In Cuba, eating is an act of improvisation. Fried chicken from a street vendor, a plain pizza, or rice and beans served simply. It's not Instagram-worthy, but it's authentic. And ironically, many tourists end up saying, "The food here is more natural. I never once got sick." See? Even scarcity has its own marketing. But what's most impressive isn't the food or the music. It's the hospitality. Even earning merely $30 a month, Cubans still smile, share the little they possess, and even invite you to join them on the sidewalk. Even when things are a mess, they find a way to toast with watered-down rum and keep on dancing. It's a brutal contrast, glaring poverty, and at the same time, a disarming human warmth. Cuba is a country where chaos doesn't entirely smother joy. On the contrary, it seems to amplify it. Cuba, a land caught between dreams and mere survival. It is a nation of such stark contrasts, seemingly existing in two dimensions simultaneously. On one side, the postcard image, colorful classic cars, street music, hand-rolled cigars, and people dancing as if every corner was a stage. On the other, the silent reality, young people trading intimacy for a bar of soap, families splitting a loaf of bread 4 ways, doctors saving lives without gauze or antibiotics. It's the constant clash between dreams and survival. For many tourists, Cuba is a paradise frozen in time, but for those who actually live there, it is a prison disguised as a cultural spectacle. What you may find charming: an empty street, an old building, a rusty car to a Cuban, it's just another symbol of what never truly changes. Yet, resistance still exists. Not the revolutionary resistance the government peddles in its speeches, but the resistance of those who insist on living, laughing, singing, playing baseball in the 100-degree sun, and smiling at a passing stranger. It's this resilience that keeps the island standing, even when everything around it is crumbling. And that's what gets to you the most, the living contradiction. A country that preserved its culture and identity, yet sacrificed its freedom. That displays joy on its face but conceals the ache of an empty stomach. That both inspires and saddens simultaneously. So I ask you, what is Cuba to you? A tropical paradise frozen in time, or an open-air prison? If you visited, leave your story in the comments. If you've never been, share this video with the friend who still calls Cuba a paradise, just salsa and cigars. I want to see if he still considers it so romantic after truly seeing the other side. If you've made it this far, you already know this video wasn't easy. Now I really want to see who stayed with me until the very end. Comment Morinha down below. That word is the Morinha, that profound longing for a place you love but cannot return to. It's exactly what millions of Cubans carry with them each and every day. And hey, do it, because I'll be keeping an eye on the comments to see who really stayed until the very end. Now, if you thought what you saw today was heavy, wait until you click on the video that's appearing on your screen. Go on, watch it, and then tell me if the shock wasn't even bigger. Thanks everyone, and see you next time.